Thank you for auditing Professor Sky's Record Review, the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who's noticed something about this channel. If I review an artist who's very well known, I usually get a lot more views than artists who are lesser known. I think there's a couple reasons for this. Obviously, people look up more popular artists, and that's how a video like my Lana Del Rey video does better. But also, it's kind of a weird thing where I think a lot of people look for music reviews of albums that they already like. Which is fine with me because I never just say A+, 10 out of 10, right? Like I try to say something about everything that I review. But it's really one of my great joys, and it's one of the smaller joys of this channel when I'm able to introduce music and people say in the comments, I never heard of this before, I just listened to it, thank you. That's one of the greatest gifts that this channel has brought me, is just being able to spread art around, to find things and show them and let everybody know. If I review it, it means I think it's good. If you like something else I like, you might like this. So in that way, I am trying to be a sort of, I don't know, you know, the predictive algorithms that they use on Pandora and Spotify? Hopefully, maybe I could be something like that at times for people. And certainly with an artist like the one I'm going to be reviewing today, William Doyle, an amazingly British and forgettable name for a very good artist, and his album Great Spans of Muddy Time. Let me kind of play this role as kind of human predictive algorithm, which this kind of hybrid between humans and computers is actually pretty fitting with the album itself. So if on your playlist, you know, you've been listening to something like Divine Comedy, Perfume Genius, any of David Bowie's collaborations with Brian Eno, or maybe like the more avant-garde B-sides from Radiohead's OK Computer, I would say put this album up next on your playlist. Amazingly soaring, beautiful voice, used sparingly, very strong vulnerability in the voice, like that strength and vulnerability I always talk about is my favorite quality in any voice. And the production, which is a great mixture of glitchy and acoustic. I'll get more into that in great detail in this, what will probably be a fairly long video. But when you look at all these artists that I mentioned, Divine Comedy and Bowie and Radiohead, there's kind of a similarity between them all, which is you could all sort of say like, are they too smart? Are they too smart to be emotionally meaningful? Does their intelligence get in the way of their emotion? Does their brain get in the way of their heart? Well, I reject that idea completely. And I think all those artists are a good proof, as is William Doyle, that intellect can actually be used to accentuate the emotional quality of music. He calls his music, William Doyle does, song gardens. And I think that's a good way of thinking about it. It's kind of harvested, put together, a kind of heady, super smart way of looking at things, but still that get at deeper truths and very introspectively represent the emotional life within himself. I think that intelligence can actually make things more emotional. And this is a good example of that. This album at times makes me feel, it feels very cinematic at times, but cinematic like it could be a soundtrack to like a 70s German road movie. That's what I kept thinking. You know, like kind of like a driving soundtrack, a movie where not a lot happens, but the things that happen are very meaningful. At times it's very rough, very distorted. At times it's very avant-garde, but always with this voice coming in, which humanizes everything just with a second. Just like a drop, you know, a drop of this voice can humanize any soundscape. The title itself, Great Spans of Muddy Time, even sounds like a badly translated title, right? Like, oh, the German movie, which is roughly translated to Great Spans of Muddy Times. It reminds me a lot, you know, you'll see back there, you'll see the Bowie Low album, a lot of that, not so much in the way it sounds, although that too, but really the mixture of instrumental and vocal, which leads to the whole album having a very atmospheric feeling, tons of synths and layers everywhere. It's a very digital album, okay? It is a very digital album, it is very much of its time, very clearly made largely on a computer, but the acoustic elements of it are absolutely necessary and raise the level of production. I do a little bit of research for every video, less than about 5 to 10 minutes, depending on what's said. And I learned a little bit about this album that makes a lot of sense. Apparently, William Doyle had experienced a massive hard drive failure. I experienced one of these in 2017. I lost 7 years of PowerPoints, lesson plannings, a couple articles I was in the process of writing. It was a terrible, terrible time. And apparently all he had were cassette tapes of the demos that he had made. And so he integrates those into the album. So the way that this album feels, this interesting mixture of digital and acoustic, or digital and analog, comes by apparently quite honestly. And it has this whole feeling often of being a slightly distorted tape that you might find. He describes it as an Englishman gone mad and compares it to Bowie's Berlin Trilogy and Robert Wyatt, which, if you've never heard Robert Wyatt's comic opera album, stay tuned. That's an unintentional pun. That's the name of a track on the album. But stay tuned. I will eventually do a review of that album as maybe, not the best album of the century, but definitely one of them. The cover itself is another good example of how something can be both too smart for its own good while also not being too smart for its own good. Something that is meaningful despite its intelligence. I'm going to try to pronounce this as I heard it pronounced in its original Dutch. Melchior de Hoedekuder. I'm not kidding. I believe that's how you pronounce it. The cover is this 1680 painting of these birds, these water birds. And I actually did a little bit of research into this. As I say, I was an art historian in college. I love art history. And this painting is a pretty good metaphor for the album itself. The amazing texture and the accuracy of these exotic birds, yet there's a personality to them. Like these birds are sort of fighting, and this guy's like looking at you with that side eye that's like, yeah, I'm here, I run this, but I'm not particularly happy. Interestingly, and I learned this from a video, I'll put this in a link from the Rijksmuseum itself. There's a 1-minute video about this piece of art. It's worth your time. I'll put that in the description. This painting, the title was changed from A Pelican and Other Birds Near a Pool, not very catchy, to Floating Feather, because you see that feather right there? And I think that's a good metaphor for this album, where you can look at this as this really analytical piece of, almost like it's from an Audubon guide, right? But then the floating feather, what does that add to this painting? What dynamism does that create? What level of sort of chaos and emotion does that floating feather elicit? Why is this painting basically never been thought of as A Pelican and Other Birds Near a Pool? Well, I think the album itself that we're listening to can be seen as that nice mixture between that floating feather and those rather dryly depicted birds. In order to explain this album, I'm going to tell you about my experiences with it. I find it enjoyable. Also, I think it's meaningful, right? Like the way that we listen to music is important. The way that we hear it. No one listens to music in a void. And as I talk about on this channel, I live a pretty full life. I have 2 kids and a full-time job where I teach French. And so like where I can fit music into my life is often bizarre. So I'm going to give you the homework for this video. The homework is where I tell you to play a song and listen to it. I'll put a link to it up there. It is a great song. It's called Semi-Bionic. It is a good example of what this album is like. But let me tell you about the 2 ways that I've listened to this song. The first one, I was driving through the village, which is near my house, okay? The village where I live, and I was driving through, and it was a little bit of a stressful time. It was right around a traffic hour. And the thing is, I have an old car. There's going to be a lot of props to today's video. I have an old car, a 2009 Toyota Corolla. And it's really old school. It doesn't even have automatic windows. You have to do the crank. Manual transmission, everything. The main problem is the sound system's not very good, and there's no real good way to integrate an iPhone into the music. You need one of these mamma jammas, okay? So you have to plug that into the aux thing in the car, and then it goes to this, and then you have to get one of these little dongle adapters from Apple, and then that's how you have to make it work. This is basically broken. It's one of these every time you plug this in and you want to listen to music, you just have to hope that you magically put the phone in the right place and that it doesn't move and that you don't hit a pothole, because if you want to hear all the music the way that it was actually made, you just have to be lucky. But I'm dying to hear the rest of this album. This song falls right in the middle of it. I've been enjoying it so far, and I'm listening to it, and it's and I'm sitting there like, and so I just go, screw it. And it's not happening, you know? The ox gods are not with us today. Little did I realize, on my second listening, there was nothing wrong with the chord. My second listening came about 7 hours after that. I suffer from insomnia, where I fall asleep, and then a half an hour after I fall asleep, I wake up. I usually start thinking about death, and I get all bummed out, and I have to do something else. So I go down to my kitchen, and I do something which my mom used to do when she had trouble sleeping. I got myself some buttermilk. Wonderful, wonderful buttermilk. I pour it into my cup. Buttermilk. I actually put buttermilk today, not coffee. And then I have the rest of my snack, which is an improvised snack that I have at night, in which I take cashews and I dip them into cultured French butter. This probably doesn't help me sleep, but it's really good. If you've never dipped cashews into butter, mwah. So I'm sitting there, I'm drinking my buttermilk, I'm having my butter cashews, and I'm like, well, I'll just listen to this album again. I stopped listening to it at Semi-Bionic. All of a sudden I realized that was intentional. That was the way the song was made. It's intentionally sounding as though, like back in the old days when you have an MP3 player and a cell phone would ring, they would make this odd, distorted sound. That's the actual rhythmic basis of the song. And I'm sitting there at my kitchen table, 10 feet that way, and I'm just having this, like, you know that experience that you have with music? You know that great experience, that transcendent experience, that whole reason that we listen to music? I'm not gonna get super religious, but it is transcendent, you know, where you listen to music and you feel as though there's something you can't possibly explain, which brings you closer to, you can say God, or to some great unknown feeling. I don't know what it is, but I'm having it at 1:39, 1:40 in the morning, eating my cashews, drinking my buttermilk, and hearing this song, and this super jarring, with the voice that comes in over it. A sound so annoying, I played it for my wife this morning, and she's like, turn it off, this makes me want to run away. She couldn't even make it to the vocals because it's so jarring. But this voice just comes in, and this beautiful juxtaposition between these two different things, this jarring sound and this beautiful voice. This is as good of a combination of jarring electronic sounds and angelic human voices as has ever been put to music. And I'm including David Bowie, and I'm including Tom York. It has just never been done this well. It is just beautiful. And what's great is that the song develops, and that's a trademark of this album. It develops to where it goes from this glitchy nightmare to the beginning of the second verse, where all of a sudden we have almost like a Who-style guitar chords. Do, 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 do. And those distorted sounds, that rhythmic sort of fades out. And his voice even sounds almost like Paul Williams, just that amazingly, just piercingly clear. Until eventually a real drum set comes in, pretty rare on this album, starts playing a nice line, and a real bass, and this real guitar keeps playing. And is it even in tune? I don't know if this guy tuned the guitar for the entire album, and it doesn't really matter. Apparently, his other work, I've never listened to anything by William Doyle ever before. I don't know who he is. I know where he's from. I found out about that. But I don't know anything about him. But apparently he's a perfectionist. You know, one of these guys who gets in the studio and Brian Wilson's it up, princes it up until everything's perfect. Apparently, the experience of losing everything just made him say, screw it, and just put it together like this. That contradiction is felt. You feel somebody who loves making perfect music, who is just saying, forget it, I'm just going to make it the way this sounds. By the end of that verse, the distorted bits are basically completely gone, and you can even just notice, and I noticed this while I was dipping my cashew into straight butter, sweet, salty, cultured butter, that there's actually a doubled voice, just in the right channel, just a sea of voices and reverb, this beautiful atmosphere. I hope you've heard it when you listen to it. By the time we get to the outro, the real drums are gone, there's a drum machine, and the hook, the lyrical hook that's been all over repeats again, just saying semi-bionic hands, fully robotic legs. The drum machine goes away, then you're just left with the drums, and then you're finally ending with just these distorted sounds. An amazing journey of perfectly imperfect production all the way throughout. The lyrics are unclear and sad, which is what I would say is the dominant emotions throughout this entire album. Apparently, he was inspired, the title, Great Spans of Muddy Time, is inspired by some British gardener person on TV. I love British culture, but I don't love British culture enough to know famous gardeners on TV who described depression as great spans of muddy time. It's very much muddy, even that, like, it makes sense when you hear great spans of muddy time, but it's also a little bit obscure like this. It seems as though this theme of being bionic is like about wanting someone to belong to, but only if he has these legs. It's not quite clear. I'm gonna go much deeper into lyrics later in the video when I read an entire song to you. So there's an example of what it sounds like. And listen, maybe you don't like that music. That's totally cool. You know, maybe just come here hoping I'm going to review the new Griselda, rap album from Benny the Butcher, right? I'm going to do that too on Thursday. But if you like all that stuff I said, if you like really smart, emotionally strong, well-produced music, then jump aboard the Doyle train with me. Seriously though, William Doyle. It just, even saying it isn't nice. William Doyle. William Doyle. It doesn't matter. The music's good. So I'm now going to go through the rest of the album, track by track. The opening track, I Need to Keep You in My Life, is something of a statement right off the beginning. Just the voice is so strong and haunting and ethereal. The keyboards are slightly distorted, also quite haunting, overly reverbed. The whole album is super reverbed to the point where you just feel you're in a cave of just echo and lush texture. I would say it's glitchy and lush. Everything about this album is glitchy and lush. It's very cinematic. It's made with these I almost said imperfections, which is a weird Freudian slip. I'm gonna save that. Remember this video. I'm gonna come back to the term imperfections. It's quite good. Apparently, it seems as though William Doyle has at some point worked with Brian Eno, and I don't know what Brian Eno is doing now. And I don't know, so everyone wants to be like Bowie. And everyone wants to be inspired by Eno. But so few people have done what they managed to do, or even come close to it. This album really does. It really does. That's pretty high praise. Beautiful lyrics in here. The world seems to stand still in your house, and the weight of it all is kept out, and de-gauzed, and deloused. Deloused. My daughter swore this was Perfume Genius when she listened to it. She's like, no, this is the first song off the Perfume Genius, which makes sense, not really sonically, but definitely emotionally, the kind of heartfelt, beautiful, broken sounds. And the guitar on here is this weird kind of plucking and double voices. Speaking of voices, you can hear Toby whining outside, upstairs. Hopefully it's not going to be too bothering. The next track is And Everything Changed. And this is almost like a dance track, kind of in the same way that Low has a couple tracks which you can kind of dance to. The guitar is kind of like chunky, and the drums are very nice with these layers of synths. You can't even fit all the words in there. This great lyric, I feel all right, I believe. I feel all right, modifier, I believe. That I believe really undercuts the sense of being all right. Doubled in ear sound when he sings this line, I'm always dimming a light switch. And this is, I believe, the most clearly influenced by the Low aesthetic of just these double voices, very Bowie, multiple voice, low voice, and medium voice at the same time. And just this lyric said over and over again. Almost like always crashing someone else's car. I'm always dimming a light switch. I don't exactly understand what it means, but it makes sense at the same time. There's a backwards guitar solo. How long since they've done, backwards guitar solos used to be all over the place. It's nice hearing it. Buttermilk. Somewhere Totally Else is the next track. It has a cool kind of like synth loop and a drum machine loop and a so it has this kind of automated feel. And then a discontinuous organ comes on. And this is the first instrumental track on the album, of which there'll be many, including the next track, Shadow Tackling, a very kind of industrial drum loop, kind of these weird sort of orchestral horns. And then the next track is Who Cares, which, so we've had 2 instrumental tracks, and then Who Cares comes on with these kind of bloopy synth sounds. The voice sings, but not much. There's not many lyrics in here. Who cares what they say? Weird sort of like rainfall, like backwards rainfall sounds, like leading into Nothing at All, which has kind of a Casio-style drum machine. And here comes the voice, and it's back. And he's full crooner, like just a crooner, just singing with that beautiful vibrato and singing with just this piercing clarity. It's almost a 50s style chord progression, like a box progression, you know, like it has that kind of sound to it, but mixed in with these kind of aggressively piercing strings that are being played on the keyboard. And some lyrics here, just to give you an example. What I meant, the feeling and the sentiment, were buried beneath great lengths of nothing at all. What comes next if I'm unable to express? I strongly suspect that it's nothing at all. The kind of sad, not really nihilistic, but maybe greatly deceived or greatly disappointed lyrics about existence and about feelings buried beneath great lengths of nothing at all. Good example of the lyricism here, but the song itself ends with an organ tone, a sort of oddly warm organ tone. Rain Falls is very automated synthesizers here, but they're doing a sort of rainfall, kind of Mickey Mousing the sound, where it actually sounds a little bit like descending rain. And it's a very short song about gardens. I think it's about gardens in a way, because he's disappointed that it's not raining. And the main people who are disappointed that it's not raining are gardeners. It seems as though he's watching this garden show. You know, I think you could do an interesting story, video essay. I might do it someday. I don't know if I know enough about British music, but definitely gardens in British music are so important. I think you could do, I know you could do, and I will probably do this, a study of the Beatles, how their wealth is exclusively presented through the lens of going from cities to nature. You know, so you have George Harrison in his garden and his house, and Paul on his ranch, and John in his complete state of nudity and sort of, you know, going back to nature. I think there's kind of something there. I don't know. That's neither here nor there. But this song, I think, emphasizes this quality of the album, where it seems to be sort of in touch with nature while also being a little bit uncomfortable with it and disappointed in nature at the same time. It ends abruptly with kind of a synthesizer solo, leading into the track New Uncertainties. This has just a lot of distorted sounds. This is where you can really hear that it must have been recorded onto a tape. And I wrote initially, so you know, I don't have a script, I just have notes. And I wrote on my notes here, a bridge too far? Like, is this too much instrumental? Is this too abstract? And I think this is my problem. This album back here, Low by David Bowie, I say that I love it, but I don't love it the way it deserves to be loved. I don't always listen to the instrumental songs. I'm sorry, I don't. I should. I understand that I'm missing the full genius of Eno and Bowie working together. But I just want to hear sound and vision, you know, like I can't help it. Even though I try to be such a good music listener and so respectful of the artist, it's hard for me to make it through all those instrumental songs. So I don't know. I think this album is nice. The William Doyle album is nice because they're not as segregated as they are on Low. You have to listen to it, and then some of the songs that have voices barely have voices, and then some of the songs are crooner songs. I would say it's a better job of holding your hand along through these instrumental parts. But the problem is, when you have a voice as beautiful as Bowie or as William Doyle, you just want to hear that voice. Why are you depriving me of that voice? Next track, St. Giles Hill, is one of those songs that barely has lyrics but does at the same time. It sounds kind of like echoing madness with like this harp, and the voice is intentionally warbled and altered. And it turns out, I looked this up, and St. Giles Hill is actually a graveyard. So I guess this might be a meditation on death. I found out that this person, William Doyle, is from Bournemouth. I don't know where that is. I will tell you that I collect posters from the band The Smiths, and I try to buy the ones that are beat up because I find those more interesting because they have a history. And so my copy of What Difference Does It Make, it's like torn up and has tape on it, used to hang in a record shop called The Armadillo. in Bournemouth, which I guess was a huge institution in that town and was owned by the same people who owned a club called the Midnight Club, which is where like The Cure and all the big bands in England would come through and play. So I don't know. I don't know much about Bournemouth except this singer, and I feel like I have a pretty interesting piece of Bournemouth memorabilia. But I don't, is it near London? Is it near Manchester? Hey, England, why don't I know about your geography? Seriously, I feel like every week I have to learn about another small British hamlet. Then comes the song Semi-Bionic, which I described in some detail. Forgotten Film is almost a continuation of that with these glitchy sounds, the lush glitchy sounds. The drum beats kind of start and stop. Things go between left ear and right ear. This whole album with the interplay between the glitchy and the lush actually reminds me, this is the second video in a row I'm talking about my brother Amos, but my brother Amos is a great artist, visual artist. And the best thing that he does, unfortunately doesn't translate that well to the internet, is he does sketchbooks. He does a sketch every day. And so he has these sketchbooks, and every day, you know, he'll do a sketch, and he might do a sketch of someone on the train, and it's beautiful, but it's kind of rough. And then another sketch of, you know, his cat or whatever, and it's nice. And then like he'll have like, you'll just turn the page and there'll be a double page spread with watercolors of a beautiful landscape. And you just, oh my God. And then you flip the page and it's another kind of nice sort of rough sketch. That's kind of how this album feels. Like from track to track, it's like, oh, what a cool sketch. Oh, wow, you really captured that in there. Oh, this little instrumental song, it's really kind of neat and cool and glitchy. Oh, there's a couple words in there and then, wow, okay. That's a beautiful Rhode Island sunset over the ocean. Okay, so I don't know. I don't know. My brother moved near me, so I think about him a lot. This song is also basically polyrhythmic. At times it comes together, and at times it falls apart. There's a lot of play like that in here, playing with automated rhythms and letting them fall out and fall back in. The next track, I think we could think of as sort of the, I guess it's the title track. It's called Theme from a Muddy Time. The best example of something I would say that is both glitchy and lush. The voice just comes over this weird kind of creeping synthesized bass drum, which I swear loses the beat at one point. So it's like doom, 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 doom. I'm pretty sure it does. So much reverb and echo. You just feel like you're in this muddy time. Maybe the echoes are trying to emphasize the sense of being lost or this echo in here. And this is the one I'm going to read you all the lyrics because I think it really tells you a lot. So here he is. He's watching this British gardener show. I'm sorry I don't know his name. You can put it in the comments if you know. It doesn't matter to me. And like so his whole melody is sung, and this sounds the most like almost a semi-melted VHS tape, the whole instrumentation. And this is what he says with his beautiful voice. Terrible time in my life, moonlight was not to be mine, walking perpetual day, throwing the hours away. Diffuse and empty inside, want to be mine, mine in the truest of sense, mine in the present tense. To be loved by myself, show some love for myself, grow a lot from inside, turn the rot inside out and glow a lot. Straightforward, introspective, going through this terrible time in the life and describing it as moonlight was not to be mine. Perpetual day. I'm not saying that this is one of the best songs you can listen to while you're sitting in your bathrobe, dipping cashews into butter and then licking the butter off your fingers. My pretenses of sophistication I hope, are washing away here. I'm not saying this is the best song to possibly listen to while you're in an insomniac fit, but it's pretty good. Walking perpetual day, throwing the hours away. But what he needs to find is how to turn the rot inside out and glow. It's ultimately a hopeful album that he's making it through this great span of muddy time, but he's making it out into, I suppose, a more verdant garden. The final track is called A Sea of Thoughts Behind It, kind of bloopy synthesizers, sort of like the end credits theme that fits with the rest of the album. So there's my review. I hope I've convinced you to listen to the album. It's really very good. Okay, whew. This has been nice. All right, well, I suggest buttermilk too. It's an acquired taste, but it's more for just pancakes. All right, till next time, there's the camera.